Today, obviously, this is. Let me give you an overview of what we are doing. And in fact, that we have established a consortium of leading universities of Pakistan, as well as some think tanks are also there. The objective of this consortium is to deliberate and highlight the various aspects which are much relevant with the science and technology, as well as the socio-economic development, because it has a strong correlation between the science and technology development and the socio-economic development. So, on annual basis, we hold invention to innovation summits at all over Pakistan, in the leading universities of Pakistan. In Karachi, it's a Karachi University. In Punjab, it's a Punjab University. In Peshawar, it is in the Peshawar University, in Balochistan University as well, and over here in Islamabad. So, obviously, even during the COVID era, what we did, we conducted or we analyzed, or impact analysis was done of the COVID impact on the various sectors. It was a sectorial analysis, and about, I think, the dozens of the technical sessions, on obviously online sessions, were conducted, and a report was generated, in which the whole value chain of the different sectors was analyzed. Today's session is a very interesting session. Obviously, we will be talking about special economic zones, and when we say about the special economic zones, obviously we talk in terms of the CPEC, because currently what we are focusing the CPEC as well. If I give an overview of that situation, that the Pakistan experienced a slow growth rate ranging from 0.4% somewhere in 2008 to 4.24% in 2015, and nevertheless, owing to a certain strategic and economic development that includes construction of China-Pakistan economic corridor, and reflected a positive trends in all major sectors of the economy during 2014 and 18. Therefore, the GDP growth rate stood to 5.2% in 2018. Though the global donors and the rating institutions pinning hope on the country's economic potential to rise as fast as growing a promising regional economy, Pakistan, due to the prevailing structural constraints, is still struggling with its economic goals, which includes at least 10% annual growth. And during the first quarter of the fiscal year of 2018-19, the GDP squeezed growth was negative, and the growth was shown as a negative growth. And Pakistan's manufacturing sectors registered an average annual rate of around 7%, despite a slowdown in the recent years. And this marks resilience of the Pakistani industries and the entrepreneurs, which is very crucial for sustained economic growth. And if from the historical perspective, if you see that I think it was in 1960, the Pakistan adopted the import industrializations, and later in 1980, it shifted its focus toward the export-oriented development. And since the country is between the two aspects of the trade, and the first economic zone, special economic zones, was established in 83, and now the CPEC is there, and I think there are 9 economic zones are there. One is the Rashakai economic zone, then Dhabeji, Bostan, Allama Iqbal Industrial City, then ICT model industrial zone, Industrial Park Pakistan, Port Qasim, Mirpur, Muhammad Marble City, and Gilgit-Baltistan special economic zones. I believe that although these nine special economic zones have already been earmarked, but there is a lot of work is still to be done. In number of economic zones, even the pre-feasibilities have not been developed. The map, although the mapping has been done to some extent, but it's still the kind of investment which was required for these respective economic zones is not visible. And one of the challenge, in addition to other structural challenges, is that the relevant stakeholders, I think, are not at board, which means the business communities or the business entities who have to invest in those respective economic zones. So second is that the act which was came somewhere in, I don't remember the exact date. I think somewhere it was in 2012, the Special Economic Zones Act 2012, and it also needs some revision, and there is a strong need that there must be an effective coordination between the policymakers and as well as the business community who has to invest, whether that business community of the within the Pakistan or through the foreign direct investments. So we are going to discuss these things in today's sessions. And first of all, I request Dr. Samad Saab, Dr. Ghulam Samad Saab. Dr. Ghulam Samad Saab is a renowned researcher, professor, analyst, economist, who is associated with PIDE and recently been appointed, is been associated with the Asian Development Bank. And I think he is going to discuss the current status of special economic zones and obviously the issues and challenges. I believe he is not going to discuss only the issues and challenges, but he is going to give us the way forward. Dr. Samad Saab, please.
Thank you so much, sir. And I appreciate the invitation, and I also appreciate the developing the stage for today's discourse. So as you mentioned, I will start off with the current status of the special economic zones, and then I will talk about the issues related to the special economic zones and of course the challenges and way forward. So before I jump into the presentation, current state that is related to the economic development zones, and then issues, there's a lot of issues, so I don't want to dig down to all of these issues, but what I'm will try to focus on the trade facilitation related measure I believe that are very much important for the delivery of the special economic zones. And then of course, based on those specific issues, I will bring some reforms or the way forward for the special economic zones. So I will start off with a little bit with the importance of the special economic zones. So if we look into the global scenario of the special economic zones, or I would frame it like why we need the special economic zones. So in one of the World Bank studies in 2008, we can see the around 3,000 zones are there in 135 countries. And these zones are approximately creating a value of $500 billion in trade values. And at the same time, this also provides around 68 million direct jobs to the economies. So the huge potential globally and special economic zones are there. Similarly, if we look into very specific to the Chinese economies, in terms of its FDI, it's around 50%. Again, in exports, the total contribution is 44%. In employment, it's again contribute to 6.3% in the Chinese economies. So as you mentioned in your opening remarks, with this backdrop, Pakistan came up with the Special Economic Zone Act in 2012, and the basic objective was to focus on the investment and of course on the revival of the export diversification in this country. And it is a well-established fact that the special economic zones are, of course, that will help you in the regional connectivity, it will help you in the competitiveness, and of course it will bring in the increase in exports and productivity, so that the better prospects for the economic growth and jobs should be created in the market. So these are the overall reason that why we do need the special economic zones for a country. As I mentioned at the opening, that I will start off with the current status of the special economic zones, but again I will be very quick here that you already mentioned these 9 special economic zones under the CPEC. But just to broadly categorize these 9 special economic zones into 2 categories or the 2 tiers, the advanced stage, the 3 that you mentioned, and then followed by the 6 other the priorities, or I would say the category 2 SEZs are there, and the names are of course obvious there. The advanced stage special economic zones, the Beji based in Tata, the Rashakai, Nowshera Mardan special economic zones, in Allama Iqbal Industrial City and based in Faisalabad. So broadly, I will focus on these 3 advanced special economic zones. But before I proceed to the special economic zones issues in Pakistan, let me very quickly walk you through what type of economic development zones are available in China. Because most of the time we have been relate ourselves to the Chinese economies or the Chinese special economic zones. So very quickly, if there is any lesson that can be derived and that can be related to the special economic zones in Pakistan. So if you look into the 4 columns that what I did here, I broadly categorized originally, like in one of the Chinese document, the special economic zones are I think the categorization is in 14 special economic development zones. But broadly, if you can club all these 14s, I can see it in a 6 broader kind of categories. So just to see you the left hand side, the zone class is there, followed by the zones, then what are their main or central purposes, and of course followed by the major preferential facilities. So this categorization I can see unfortunately very clearly in Pakistan, that whether do we have the categorization, do we have the very clear explicit of course, the purposes is there, but in most of these 3 advanced SEZs, you will see a direct attraction of the FDI, attraction or the increase in the exports. But is there any implicit differences in these 3 zones or not? So what I meant to say here is the categorization in that you mentioned at your opening remarks, the moment one that is in a format FATA, the moment one should need to be different in terms of categorization from these already 9 CPEC so-called, the special economic zones. So the categorization needs to be very pragmatic. At the same time, if you look into the preferences or the fiscal kind of incentives in the special economic zones in Pakistan, most of the time, and for most of the 3 documents that I read recently in the advanced one, the tax preferences to the developer and taxation preferences to the entrepreneur, also to the enterprises, is almost similar and same for all these 3 advanced tiers. So these are the Chinese model, very crystal clear, categorized into a sub-region and with their pursuit objective. But unfortunately, in Pakistan, it's still, I can see a lot of, a way forward in terms of delivery. And we do need to learn from the Chinese model as well. So if you can see the Chinese special economic zones model, the failure rate in China, which is a well-established economy, the failure rate is 77% in China. So just compare yourself with the Chinese well-established economy, what would be the failure in Pakistan? So obviously the percentage needs to be very clear. But of course, the importance of the special economic zones need to be understood, and it's crystal clear to us that of course it will be there to deliver on the perceived objective. But the second thing that worried myself is the coordinating agencies, and broadly 21 to 23 coordinating agencies are involved to deal the special economic zones in Pakistan. And these coordinating agencies are started from the federal government to the provincial government, and there are some entities that are working parallel in the provincial government as well. So this simultaneous kind of established entities might affect the delivery of the special economic zones. And of course, after the devaluation, industrialization is there, a provincial subject, but parallelly we also established the special economic zone authorities in the provincial government. So their functional clarity and their deliverance again need to be stressed upon. And the fourth thing that I can relate to the special economic zones in Pakistan, if I can derive from the well-established Chinese model so far, the institutional conversion mechanism that is very much important for the special economic zones toward industrialization is again need to be worked on. So based on these kind of consideration, I personally suggest we should start up with one special economic zone. That might be Rashakai, that might be Faisalabad, Allama Iqbal one, that might be Tatta one. That should be considered as a trial basis or as a pilot special economic zone. And we need to learn from our mistakes, and we also need to learn from the good practices. So once we are established one specific SEZs in a one particular place, that model, that mistakes need to be corrected, and the model can be replicated to the rest of the SEZs. So what I meant to say here is the special economic zone model is a very good model, but at the same time, it's very complicated if we look into the failure rates in China and of course worldwide as well. So these are the 5 fundamental issues that are important while we are discussing the special economic zone. The first one, in terms of the delivery of the special economic zone. So if you need to deliver, these 5 issues needs to be considered. The first one is the regional connectivity. And if we look into the regional connectivity, unfortunately, Pakistan in a CAREC region, which is 5 Central Asian region, Afghanistan, China, Mongolia, Georgia, and Azerbaijan. So the 13 CAREC countries, Pakistan is only above Afghanistan in terms of the regional connectivity. So need to strengthen the regional connectivity before we rely on the special economic zones. Secondly, recently we had a study where we calculated the cost and time clearance of the Pakistan exports to the BCPs. They call them the business crossing points. And again, unfortunately, the cost and time clearance for these BCPs like the Turkham and so on and so forth is highest in the CAREC region. So again, the cost of doing businesses is contributing here. And this kind of consideration eventually will affect the performance of the special economic zone. So regional connectivity needs to be improved. The second one is that again, you mentioned in your opening, respected chair, the structure of Pakistani exports is unfortunately stagnant. Since inception, the technology component needs to basically, once there's a more technology component that enhance the competitiveness of the export and that give you a market access. Unfortunately, Pakistan is still relying on the low technology component. We did not move ourselves from the low technology towards the medium technology and high technology component so that you can achieve the market competitive level. Secondly, if you look into the export diversification in terms of the countries and in terms of the categories, Pakistan historically is still stagnant or relying mostly on the textile group and followed by the food group. So most of the time, these two kind of groups are there. We clearly need the diversification here. And if you look into the right-hand side, where I did the decade-wise kind of analysis, our main exports are again stagnant to these 5 or 6 countries. You can start off with the USA, UK, UAE, China, and Afghanistan. And after a decade, it is again stagnant there. So unfortunately, the country is again stagnant. We need to look towards the untapped economies. And I stress again here, the untapped in Central Asia is one of the opportunities for Pakistan that needs to be tapped. And of course, the African economies are there. And some of the other economies where the revealed preferences for Pakistan economies is thus available that need to be tailored. So this is my second point. The structure of the exports need to be changed if you want to focus or you want to deliver in terms of the trade and of course on the special economic zones. The third issue that is directly related to the special economic zone is the industrial sector allocation. And if I can give you the example from the Rashakai, broadly the 5 industries are categorized there that are garment and textile. that are home building material, that is the general merchandise, electronics and electrical appliances, and finally automobile and mechanical equipment. So these 5 categories are there. But unfortunately, I did not see the economic underpinning, like why we have selected these 5 industries. What I meant to say here is we need to be very pragmatic while we are selecting the respective industries there, so that by the end of the day, if you establish these kind of a diversified industries, then the specialization will not be achieved, unfortunately. And if you are not achieving the specialization in a specific special economic zone, then the integration to the global value chain and to the regional value chain will remain very limited. So the second thing that I need to highlight here is the industrial sector allocation needs to be very pragmatic, needs to be very practical. Haphazardly, the selection of the industries might not help us in the pursuit the SDGs objective. The fourth issue is one size fits all a policy, and again, for all these 3 well-established special economic zones, so far I walk myself through, most of their incentives are similar. But what I would suggest, if you need to develop the moment special economic zone, their incentive structure should be different from the Rashakai and from the Faisalabad one. Otherwise, if you go with the same incentive structure, that cannot be developed. So for those SEZs where you require a special attention that needs to be considered, in the Faisalabad one, they have their natural endowment is there, their natural kind of facilities are there. So we should not compare the Faisalabad special economic zone with the rest of the other special economic zones. The fifth one is what I call them the promote backward linkages. So one of the biggest issue currently, if you talk to the business guys or the people at the chamber conferences, the well-established industries in Pakistan, they are worried about the special economic zones, and they are worried in terms of like, hey, what is going to be the status or the situation with us? What I suggest is, parallelly, if you are going to establish the special economic zone, you need to establish, the backward linkages with already established industries in Pakistan. So the already established industries should not suffer. So these are the 5 biggest kind of issues that are related to the special economic zone. So based on these 5 special issues, and this is my last slide, I will stop after this. The challenges and the way forward. The first thing that I re-emphasize here again is how we can improve the regional connectivity. Unless and until our regional connectivity is not improved, I don't see like a very clear picture of the special economic zones that can deliver on their pursued objective. So the CPEC that sir, you mentioned at the beginning is an opportunity for us. Now the question is that how we can approach it, how we can avail the CPEC, or how we can utilize the CPEC opportunity to connect ourselves to the regional global value chain or the regional value chain. In the Central Asia, currently we do have 6 corridors there. So through CPEC, we can connect ourselves to the 6 corridors in the Central Asia that will connect us to the Caucasian economies, that will connect us to the Central economies, Asian economies, and eventually, of course, to the Russian and the Europe economies. So CPEC is an opportunity that needs to be looked like very, I would say again, the practically or pragmatically. Otherwise, the regional connectivity kind of things will be missing from us. Second thing, sir, my way forward is I rarely see a very practical coordination among these 21 or 22 agencies. In most of the time, the land issues are there, and you can name it. The issues are there, and then some way or another way, the government intervene to resolve the related issues. So a coordinated approach needs to be further strengthened in order to deliver on the SDGs objectives. My fourth and second last suggestion is the trade facilitation measures that need to be again very practical. Unfortunately, most of the trade facilitation measures, cost of doing businesses and ease of doing businesses, sorry, these are there. Some of them are now the businesses of the provincial government, but they need to be strengthened further. So that the trade facilitation measure should be very practical. Otherwise, I gave you the example of the BCPs with the Turkham border and with the rest of the economies. Just imagine yourself, you are at the special economic zone at the Roshakai, but your performance at the Afghanistan border is like, like very, in terms of cost, in terms of time clearance, is very high. So how you are going to compete with the regional economies, especially with the Tajikistan, if the Afghanistan can easily trade with the Tajik economies. So these are the trade facilitation measures that need to be very pragmatic. And sir, my last point is adapting ourselves to the new normal. After this pandemic, one thing is, sir, very clear that the industries, the established industries in the special economic zones in a future will deliver once they adapt themselves to the new normal. And what do I mean by new normal? Very specific to the trade thing is the digital connectivity is now must. And unfortunately, again, we had a study at the Kerak region. Pakistan is again least connected digitally within the Kerak economies. And the reason are again obvious. The infrastructure landscape that's required for the digital connectivity is almost very limited. And unfortunately, again, our economies in terms of the digital connectivity is very over-regulated, and this kind of regulation needs to be catered. And so related thing is already the e-commerce enhancement is required, sir. E-commerce policy developed is there. Pakistan has been doing a very kind of, I would say, tremendous job in terms of the policies there. But what we now need to deliver on that policy implementation would be a challenge for us. How we can kind of kill the over-regulation that are existing in Pakistan economy. So, sir, I stop here with these 4 way forward. Thank you, and looking forward for our questions if there's any questions.
Dr. Ghulam Samad Sahab, thank you very much. I think you have given a very not only comprehensive, but a very logical presentation and thoughts on a special economic zone. What you have done that you have given us the global scenario of various special economic zones which exist all over the world, and need of the special economic zones because in terms of percentage of GDP in the respective countries, and particularly you have referred the Chinese economic development and special economic zones, particularly in context with the failure rate of 77%. And also you indicated about the categorization of CPEC, special economic zones. That has to be the pragmatic approach to be followed. Plus, you have raised the issue of obviously the coordinating agencies in Pakistan. This is always challenging in Pakistan. I think this is one of the biggest challenge which exists in Pakistan in every sector. And unless until this coordination is not effective, not only effective but as well as efficient as well. So the desired objectives cannot be achieved. And you also, I think that is very much logical and rational and even economical, that the institutional conversion mechanism, which means that we have to start at least from the one economic zones, and that may be treated as a pilot economic zone. And whatever the success and the failure achieved through that experience and those applied into the rest of the economic zones instead of handling so many economic zones simultaneously. You also spoke about the competitiveness, export diversifications, and industrial sector locations, and the present which means a one policy which is fit for all, which is obviously it is not a rational approach, and the missing link of the backward linkages from the for the whole system which supplement the economic zones. That is also missing. And in the way forward, you have rightly indicated that the connectivity is the one of the major aspect, and this required at least the connectivity with the Central Asian countries, and the effective coordinations between the 21 agencies which are directly or indirectly related with these economic zones, and as well as the trade facilitation agreement. These for the trade facilitation, because obviously we are going to trade with the regional countries or at the global level. So unless until we don't have those trade facilitation agreement, so there will be serious challenges with respect to our trade transactions. And lastly, but not least, post although the COVID is still going on, but even if we think that in the post COVID era, there will be much requirement of the ICT tools to be applied in the businesses, in the commerce, in everywhere. So I really thank you, and thanks to you for giving a very crispy and as well as a very interesting presentation on the subjects. Thank you very much. Now, I would like to say, but it's a very interesting topic which I can see that revive of Pakistan, the correlation of special economic zones with the revival of the Pakistan's economy. I think nobody can else can highlight this aspect than Miss Seema Khan, who is associated with the Pakistan Institute of Trade and Development, obviously an organization working under the Ministry of Commerce and under rule of the business. The trade comes under the commerce. Obviously, we are always has got a lot of stress with respect to our exports, and more since the trade deficit is there, how this trade deficit can be converted into the trade surplus. So we must have a more potential. Our products and the services must be a more competitive. And whenever we talk about the competitiveness, it means the productivity. And at least one good news is this, that I think Board of Investment has, or the World Bank in the ease of doing business, has uplifted the rank of Pakistan from 136 to 108 countries. So there must be a relationships that our ease of doing business procedures and methods have been improved. So what that will impact in with respect to the special economic zones, or and how those economic zones can contribute in terms of the GDP. Ms. Seema Khan, please, over to you.
So let me thank Mr. Rashid and the organizers of Rifa University, who have provided me with an opportunity to participate in Innovation Summit 2020 and contribute a bit of mine. The topic, as Rashid Saab has already identified, that I'll be talking about, will the special economic zones can revive the Pakistan's economy or not. Well, taking the lead from Dr. Samad, detailed presentation, I would advance the argument. It's very great that he has introduced many of the terminologies, which I need not to explain anymore. But at the same time, I'm afraid that there might be some overlapping or repetition of the ideas. And this is the advantage of arranging a webinar when the presenters are distant away. So, but we, the researchers, are used to read and discuss the same ideas again and again, and to comprehend the issue in an effective manner. So I'll try to make it less academic for the participants. And since I'm an IR student, and soon I will be having this prefix doctor with my name. So my presentation would be more comprehending the political aspect of it, and it will be felt in the presentation. As we all know that there are many successful examples of economic zones around the globe, and Pakistan, in a bid to revive its economy and to match the developmental pace of the other countries, it has, under the The government of Pakistan had the Special Economic Zone Act in 2012 and its amended version in 2016. And under the CPEC, which is the BRI's flagship project, Pakistan has proposed 9 SEZs, which Dr. Samad has detailed in, like he has told everything about it, spreading over from north to south and east to west. For few, the feasibility report is underway, and for few, like economic zone in Rashakai, it's ready to be inaugurated. Once the Chinese head of state visits Pakistan, which has been delayed due to global pandemic COVID-19. So what SEZs are considered as a strategy or as a tool to industrialize or to accelerate the economic growth of particularly the less developed countries. According to the Economist report in 2015, 4,300 special economic zones or industrial states have been established around the globe, and they have played a very significant role, especially when we talk about East Asian countries. But when we talk about China, we can see the ginormous change there and the remarkable growth of economy. And then we all are witnessing that China is quickly and swiftly surpassing US, I can't say the hegemony, but US supremacy in the global economic affairs. So it is, so if the policy, industrial development, and and in another report, in the same report in Economist 2015, China has employed 30 million workforce out of 66 million employed in overall special economic zones in the world. So industrial development can indeed be instrumental and a tool for a long-term sustainable economic growth, provided it is based upon a well thought out and well-planned strategy. As Dr. Samad has identified clearly, and we should have a well-planned, well-thought-out strategy. If the policy is just like is a hodgepodge thing, which we normally have in Pakistan, without embracing all the stakeholders on board, so its viability and its operationalization would be affected. It is said that with the start of special economic zone in Pakistan, new industries will be established, and which will increase the employability rate, and it will increase the production capacity. But these increase would vary from mining to manufacturing and food processing. But as of now, you know, all of them, like sitting Ministry of Commerce, I know mostly we're talking about the raw materials which we are exporting. We do not have like what you can say value-added products offered to the market, to the international world, except for few millions of what you can say in our software technology. Mostly we are exporting fruits and vegetables and raw materials and textile to the extent. But then when we talk about the actual industrialization, where the economy can be revolutionized, we are still lagging behind. So while we have these promises from the political governments today and tomorrow, and maybe in previous governments also, that the economic zones will revolutionize us and it will upgrade our industry and upscale our labor, the question arises how the whole idea will get materialized into a successful venture. It is a whole big exercise and combined efforts of many stakeholders that can make it successful. It is not the geographical demarcation of few acres or few hundred acres of land that can revolutionize the economy. It has to have its own fiscal regime. It has to have different, which is different from the prevalent system within the rest of the country. Or we can say the regime which is soft and more lenient in terms of tax, in terms of exemption from custom duties, or of course for a prescribed time period. We can't extend the whole thing for rest of the rest. I mean, for good. It has to be a prescribed period, but then we need to provide them conducive environment. Pakistan so that the capital goods and all those equipments or all those machinery which are required for the maintenance or for the operationalization of the industry can be imported on a duty without the duty, the customs duty. Or as Farol has referred it as a second best preference for liberalizing the trade in a controlled area and investment in specific geographical area, which rather than liberalizing the whole economy, so that in a special economic zone, it's a demarcated area where we are liberating the trade. Previously in 70s, Pakistan has established almost 100 industrial states like Hattar and Bin Qasim and many more. I don't even remember the names, but we did not see so many successful, it was a failed experiment. Why it is so, there are 101 reasons. We'll discuss it later. Likewise, the government intervention was there, and then nationalization was there, ignoring the important market factors, what the international market economy was asking for, requiring for. Likewise, after the Special Economic Zone Act in 2012 and the connecting the CPEC with regional and global markets, a proposal of 37 special economic zone was floated, which to me, to be very honest, was very ambitious idea. Some saner element prevailed, and they cut it down the figure to 9. Still, I think 9 special economic zones are too many. We, as Dr. Samad has also identified, that we should have like 1 or 2 special economic zones, and then put all our efforts there and make it a model special economic zone, fully functional and operational, and then replicate it in countrywide. The infrastructure is a fundamental factor of success to access the market, and also the transportation of resources, goods and services to and from all these zones, which we are lagging behind. But the most important factor is the site selection. Proximity to basic utilities like water, gas, electricity, and accessibility to raw material, human resources, and availability of infrastructure that can transport the product made in these economic zones are the key elements or prerequisite that can ensure the success of any special economic zone. But keeping this yardstick, we might say that special economic zones proposed in Faisalabad and in Islamabad can be a successful story. But however, the inter-regional connectivity is another most important aspect which needs to be considered here. What I mean here, that the positioning near ports and borders, which cut down the distance to market, like the one in Rashakai and Bostan, and even in GB. So looking at the past track of industrial zones in Pakistan, people like me are a bit susceptible and a bit cautious before giving any statement that it can revolutionize the economy. If we want to follow the Chinese model, we need to understand what China has done, other than demarcating a territorial boundary and declaring it as an economic zone. China's special economic zones and industrial clusters were successful due to innumerable reasons. For instance, stout commitment of uppermost leadership, preferential treatment, and lenient tax policies, institutional transformation, resilient participation, academic and industrial linkages of and in the full patronage of the government, providing public goods, and to deal with externalities. And when I'm talking about externalities, it's the law and order situation, which we are far behind in Pakistan. Coming back to the Chinese models, public-private partnership, and then there was huge foreign direct investment. It is still coming from diaspora and other international companies, and the transfers of technology, learning, and skills acquisition. There were so many factors which were working simultaneously and converging at one point, instead of going here and there, which is happening in Pakistan as of now. For example, Shenzhen was a small town with a population of less than 30,000 people, which was given the status of 1 out of 4 special economic zones in China, with special tax paybacks and privileged treatment for direct foreign investment. This small village grew exponentially, and the GDP per capita of this town raised at an average of 24.57% from 78 to 20 in the 21st century. So GDP of Shenzhen exceeded many existing big numbers like US, even it competed with the US and Hong Kong and the Singapore, owing to its successful technology sector. Since then, the city has massively developed with state-of-the-art technology, and now its population is more than 12 million, which means the urban-rural migration. In Pakistan, can we see or can we afford a rural-urban migration to this level? Because we do not have infrastructure. Our urban cities are already overburdened. So there are so many other successful models like in Mauritius, in UAE, in Singapore, and which started providing a trade route, which turned out to be the best example of economic corridors, economic zones to replicate. These countries have used economic zone as an instrument for export diversification and to attract foreign direct investment inflows to modernize their economies. Here, the economic zone did not only attract FDIs in industry, but also in other sectors of economy like tourism, agriculture, housing, and it has done splendidly in China, Singapore, Mauritius, UAE, and etc. Pakistan has to have a clear roadmap to make these 9 SEZs a success story instead of dumping the land into industrial state as had happened in the past. Most of us have been to Hattar industrial unit and been Qasim industrial unit, and we see nothing but like few ruins there. So the policymakers should focus on the latent comparative advantage which we have in the form of human resources and raw material. My basic contention is that by allocating a space does not guarantee the success, but the optimum use of given opportunities and resources. How do we synchronize all the given factors of production? Or as Lynn has identified, that it is under new structural economies that the endowment structure. According to this model, the economy's latent comparative advantage should be targeted to kickstart the growth process. For the matter, the utmost need is to align the endowment structure which comprises human resources in line with industrial requirement, international industrial requirement. To capitalize with these resources, Pakistan needs to adopt a policy which imparts skill and equips it to cater the demands of industrial revolution. For example, if we take an example, Mohammed Marble City, which is aimed at revolutionizing the marble industry in Pakistan. This area, all of us, we know that it is best with marble and granite, best type of marble and granite type in the world. Still, it is among the poorest even in Pakistan. Just by digging out the stone does not help, rather digging out stone from the mines by unskilled labor and lack of entrepreneurship and complete ignorance of international labor standards create situation like has happened in few days ago when the laborers were buried under the rock. So to make it successful, we need a multi-pronged strategy which requires state ownership, political will, institutional support, entrepreneurship, and entrepreneur skills, plus, and most importantly, the skillful labor. It is vital to link up all SEZs and to integrate in a main supply chain to attain inclusive growth. Pakistan is a lower middle income country and should focus on labor intensive industries, but not ignoring the high tech industry like in ICT and other some modernized technologies. We have to revamp the textile, leather, food processing, marble, and pharmaceutical industries and bring them at par with international standards, competing the finesse of the, as have been offered by other countries, not only to compete, but also to introduce the native product imbued in latest state-of-the-art technology. It's a game for the survival for the fittest, and only those can survive who are well prepared for the competition. We have to equip our labor force with required skills. Special arrangements should be made by developing academia and industrial linkages, as this summit is doing right now. By setting up a plant will not produce the goods. We need technicians, mechanics, machine operators who can rotate the economic engine and boost the economy. It is essential to design a model keeping the latent comparative advantage aligned with the modern techniques and fully equip them, also by strengthening the forward and backward linkages in the industry. The government needs to establish new vocational centers near the SEZs so that a proactive approach can be adopted and keep the manpower ready before the industrial unit is installed. The reasons for failure of previous units was nationalization of the units. The SEZs does need state ownership, but in terms of conceptualizing the whole idea and providing the conducive environment and giving incentives, but not interference, no interference in its operation. Let it run on market-based economic model. Let the entrepreneurs put in their ideas. Yes, the role of the government should be steering the direction. That's it. We cannot ignore the security situation. The role of the government in this aspect is pivotal. And it is the government who has to ensure the safety and the security of the area and the people. The locals should be engaged. Their participation should be ensured. It should be maximum, not in the laborer job, but also in the executive roles. And this is only possible if the government introduces programs which enable them to be part of this economic activity. And here I'm specifically referring to Bostan Special Economic Zone, where the Baloch issue will again pop up. The same apprehension is again and again happening in Western CPEC route and in Gwadar Port. The issue is the inclusivity. No plan can be successful unless it is inclusive in nature. We can build the roads, but it should only be bump free. Shouldn't be only bump free, but the highway police, which is the government here, has to streamline the traffic and also be watchful what kind of vehicles are on the road. We cannot allow the tanks to run on the roads because it will break the road. The vehicles have to be fuel efficient and eco-friendly. Likewise, the industry installed in special economic zones should be labor-intensive, eco-friendly, aligned with the local raw material, and obviously engaging all stakeholders under the state patronage. In the end, I would again emphasize on the inclusivity of all stakeholders, and only then Pakistan can operationalize the economic zone in a successful manner. Thank you, Dr. Rashid. Thank you so much.
Thank you so nice of you, Seema Khan Sahiba. You have correlated special economic zones with the economy and why those economic zones are critical with respect to the revival of the economy. And what you have indicated and highlighted, yeah, you spoke about the status of the special economic zones. You also talked about the raw materials and the value-added products. Plus, you have rightly said that there is a need of effective role of the stakeholders, because if the stakeholders have their response is lukewarm, so you can't have a success models for the special economic zones. Plus, the other aspects like fiscal regimes, obviously that has to be that has to be done through the structural reforms, and usually, and both of the speakers, I think they are absolutely right that while speaking about or earmarking about that nine special economic zones, we have to be rational. We must not be so much ambitious. So that the implementations of the establishment of the special economic zones will remain a gray area. Then you spoke about the infrastructures, logistics services, which are obviously very much critical, as well as the site selections. I remember once I was in somewhere in Thailand or China. They were doing a gemstone mining over there, and we went to one of the gemstone mine. And over there, what I saw, it was very interesting. The value addition which is to be done on the gemstone, the factories were exactly on the doorstep of those mining. So everything, the raw material is coming out. So the value addition is being done immediately at the doorsteps of the mining, so you can be competitive in terms of the price and other aspects. Then you have also indicated the concept of public-private partnership. Obviously, this is another very important area which has to be addressed. Then the transfer of the technology conversion and the rural-urban population migration, which we are facing, as well as you have also indicated about the export diversification in not only export diversifications but utilizing those as special economic zones for the other sector of the economy like tourism, etc. And that policy industrialization revolutions, and this policy must not be a typical policy which usually we make in the corridors of the secretariat, which has never been implemented on the grounds, because so the policy has to be a policy in terms of the industrial revolution, not in terms of lip service policy, just to show intentions without giving any specific policy implementation mechanism. And you also indicated about the Mohammedan economic zone with respect to the marble and granite. Exactly what is happening in Pakistan, that most of the marble and granite, the purchaser of that marble and granite is right now the major purchaser is China, and that marble and granite is just going at the cost of the stone. No value is being added in that marble and granite. We are not cutting, we are not polishing, we are not making the product of that marble and granite, and that again that product comes through the import from China to Pakistan. And obviously for this we need a multi-pronged strategy One more important point you have raised about the compliance of these international standards, because if the international standards are not being compliance for any of the sector, halal meat, any kind of a thing, in which there is a lot of potential is there. There will be a challenge with respect to our the exports proceeds, and this can only be done, and which you have said that through a participatory approach instead of working in isolations. Thank you very much